All right, hey everybody. So we are getting into our first generative project of the semester. By now you have sort of already gotten started and hopefully sort of understand the project, but I just wanted to go through and walk you through all the steps just in case anything's not super clear. That way I can kind of walk you through the whole process and give you some tips and tricks along the way. So to kind of get started, maybe I'll just take you up here and I can show you exactly what your final output should be. So we're making our 2" by 2" square into 4 different shapes, kind of inside of it. You can see here, and we're going to do that 5 different times, so that we'll have 5 different sort of 2" by 2" squares broken up in different ways, so we get different shapes. These shapes will then go on to produce different compositions or patterns. So you can kind of see this row up the top here. This shape produces these patterns. How does it do this? It does this by making different orders of these shapes filled in differently by color. So let's say maybe the first one is all black, where A, B, C, and D are all filled in black. The second one, maybe only A is white. And you can kind of go on from there. Once you have your pattern, you just apply it to your composition here. You make different sort of sequences of these shapes filled in to make your additional patterns. So your final kind of due assignment is going to be producing 5 of these shapes, and then you'll produce 3 different sequences for each one, which will produce these 3 different patterns. So this is an example of one composition or one pattern. So I start off with this sort of shape here that's been cut into these 4 different sections, A, B, C, and D. And then I convert them into black and white and have different sections filled in. So this one, all of them are filled in black. This one, only this bottom section, D, is filled in white. Here, both B and D are filled in white. This one, again, is just the bottom one. So you can kind of see how these might make a sort of little sequence. And then we'll take the sequence and apply it to our 10" by 10" grid. So because we have a 2" by 2" part, and then our composition is 10" by 10", we can produce this sort of 5" by our 5 by 5 grid where our pieces will fit in perfectly. So I can take my first segment here, place it in the first segment. I'll take my second segment here, place it in the second slot, third, 4, 5, 5, and then 6, I'll start my new line. Now once I've gone through all of the elements of my sequence, I just start over at the beginning again. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you just repeat this all the way until you get to the end. Now you can see my last piece here is the 4th one in my sequence. And this is totally fine. It doesn't have to end on the last one of your sequence. It just has to be completely filled up. And this would be considered one composition. So kind of this first one here. And we need to make the 15 of them. So once I wanted to get started on my second composition here, what I would do is just create another one of these sequences where I just fill in the different shapes with black or white in different ways. And we want our sequence to be between 4 and 16 elements. And we want to probably avoid using 5 or 10 unless you just really want to, because we have a 5 by 5 grid structure, then it'll just sort of repeat like the same way each time, and it won't be as interesting or generative. So we'll try to avoid 5 and 10 unless that's kind of the effect that you're going for. So for this shape, I'll generate 3 sequences and fill them into these compositions. Once I have all 3 compositions here, I can move on to my next shape until I have filled out all 15 compositions. And then we're done. So that's the general idea of this assignment. But just to kind of clarify, I'm going to go through and produce one of these shapes and a sequence and fill it out into a composition, just so you sort of have an idea. So I'm going to start from scratch here by going up to File, New, And I want my artboard to be 10 inches by 10 inches. So 10 inches wide and 10 inches tall. We could just start out with one artboard. And the rest of the stuff doesn't quite matter that much because we are only working in the vector space. So this raster effect doesn't work. And then the color mode doesn't really matter that much either because we are only working with black and white right now. Great, so we can go through and hit create. You can see we have a 10 inch by 10 inch artboard, and it looks awesome. So the first thing I want to do is make my little piece, right? So to do that, I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. If you don't see the rectangle here, you can right click on, what is the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth shape down, or fifth tool down. And if you right click on it, you get all these sort of options. So we're going to use rectangle. I'm just going to click and then type in 2 inches by 2 inches to get my little module size. I'm going to zoom in here. So we can see that the inside is white and the outside is black. So that means my fill is white, the inside, and my stroke, the outline, is black. And you can kind of see that over here. We want this to have no fill and no stroke. So we'll just click this little red line here to get rid of my fill. You have to have your shape selected. So click on your shape and then click this red line to get rid of the fill. And then you can click on the stroke and click this red line to get rid of the stroke. Now my shape has disappeared and that is okay because we have this different view we can go in inside of Illustrator to better see what's going on. So now we can just hit Command Y if you're on a Mac, or you can hit Control Y if you're on a PC. And then we get into this sort of white screen where I can see my shape again. Great. Now we want to use our line segment to divide our square into 4 sections. You can use either horizontal, vertical, diagonal, or curved lines. So we just want to make sure these lines go past our outer square, so that way it fully divides the shape. And if you want to make these lines curved, you can grab your curvature tool and add a point onto this line. If you click it and then click it again and drag, then it becomes a curved line, which is really cool. So I'm going to do the same thing here, just create this sort of curved section. And now I have 4 parts, and I can just click and highlight everything. Then we want to use Pathfinder to divide this up into just 4 separate shapes instead of different lines. So Pathfinder is going to be in our Properties tab right here. If you don't see it there, you can go into Window and then turn on Pathfinder. And then we just want to hit these 3 dots and use this divide option here. And then you know it works if these sort of lines outside of your rectangle sort of go away. We can turn off our outline view by hitting Command or Control Y. And now we can't see anything, so we'll have to give it a fill. So we'll highlight over our shapes and then just convert it to black. And then we'll want to select it, right click, and ungroup. So now when we hover over our shapes, you see we get separated shapes, which is awesome. We have our sort of initial component. Now we just want to kind of go through and make our sequence. So I can do that by just duplicating. I'm going to hold Option and click and drag. Then I can let go of the mouse and let go of Option, and I've got a duplicated shape. And for our sequence, we want somewhere between, let's say, 4 and 16 pieces. So I'm going to start out with 6. And then we'll just go through and pick different pieces to be white or black to kind of make these different shapes here. Cool, and I'm happy with that. And then we'll just want to start applying them. But before we get there, it would be great to have some sort of grid as a guide to allow us to kind of be more precise with how we place things. So I don't see a grid tool over here, but I can go into my edit toolbar button with the 3 dots here and grab this this little rectangular tool. If it's grayed out, it's because it might be inside of your brush menu. So we just right click on the brush and come into rectangular grid. Then we can just click anywhere on the image. We'll change this to the size of our artboard, which is 10 inches by 10 inches. And then we'll change our dividers to 4 and 4. And we're doing that because our it's just counting just the lines. So we'll actually have 5 spaces if we have 4 dividers. Great. So now we have this little grid. We can navigate it to where it's perfectly placed. Then to make guides from this grid, we can go into View, Guides, and Make Guides. So now we have guides here. And then what we want to do is go back into View, Guides, and just hit Lock Guides. Mine are already locked, but if yours aren't locked yet, you want to lock the guides so that way you can't kind of move them around. Now what I want to do is start to apply these to my composition. So I'll highlight this, and I'll just duplicate it and drag it into my segment here. Take my second one and place it into the second slot, third into the third slot, fourth into the fourth slot, fifth into the fifth slot, and sixth into the sixth slot. Great. So I've gone through all of the items in my sequence down here. And now that I've done that, I'll just start over back at the beginning. Make sure it's lined up perfectly here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll start over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Just make sure this is lined up. Great. Start over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Make sure this is lined up. Great. Perfect. And then I have one left, but I've just finished my sequence. So I'll start back over at 1, and then I'll be done. Just make sure it's lined up. Now we can go back into our outline mode here and check and see if anything is out of alignment. This one is, so I can just highlight everything and then move it up just a little bit. Everything else looks great. So that is my first composition done. If you want to see it without the guides and temporarily hide them, you do Command:, and that is your first composition. To make your second one, you just make another one of these sequences starting from this same kind of little element you made until you have 3 of them, and then you come make a new element. And that is it. When you are ready and you're finished up, what you'll do is Actually, before I talk about saving, let me talk about artboards. So if you want to add on a new artboard for your second sequence here, we can go in and hit Edit Artboards under Properties, and then we can hit plus, and we can drag that around. So that'll give you the same size artboard each time. And you can just click and drag them to position them where you want them. Might want to like have a little bit of space in between so you can fit your sequences. But yeah, we'd make these 3 compositions based on this piece. Once we finish that, we make a new piece and 3 more sequences to fill in our composition. Then once we're done, we can go through and we want to save an editable file, one that we can come back into Illustrator and change later if we need to. So to do that, we can hit Save As, save on our computer, pick where you want to save it, and then you can title it and just make sure it's the Adobe Illustrator AI file. You can hit Save and hit OK. And you can see it changes up in the bar here. We have demo.ai. But to export, once we have them all finished, you can save your Illustrator file as you go. Just kind of save it over and save it over so you have the most recent one. But we don't want to export until we're finished with all of them. So once we're ready to export, we can go into File, Export, Export As, and then we'll choose SVG. Then we can select Use Artboards and All. And basically this will just export each individual artboard as its own separate SVG file. And then you can hit Export. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out via email. Can't wait to see what you all make.